Okay. Working? Can you hear me okay? Awesome. Okay. Using my kids, my kids' AirPods because my 17-year-old stole mine. So, mm. Welcome. We'll give people a few minutes to come in. Um, wow, there's a lot of people here tonight. I'm very excited about this. Um, oh man, look at this. You guys, I don't think you guys can see the numbers, but it's wonderful to see so many people. I'm so excited. I'm gonna open the chat, webinar chat, so I'll be able.
Chat's enabled.
What?
Chat's
Enabled. You can say what you want. Just be good. Be good. Hey Joseph. Hey Sean. Hey Jonah. Hey Ken. Hey Kevin. Elijah. Andrew. I'm just reading it. Wow, look at this.
Oh, you have one question. Just the question
Hunter.
that says new data is awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited. This is actually like, you want to see the very first, while we're waiting for people, like this is the very first day that Nick and I started working together. He brought this over. I'll show you these drawings. This was his very first drawing. He brought it. He lives right across you can't see because it's dark, but I'm right on the ocean here. And then on the other side of the sound is Nick, and he takes the ferry over. He was just here this week. And we put him up all over the wall. Like that's why he comes here and we put everything on the floor and on the wall and everything. And oh, hey Regine, what's up? Actually, like, yeah, we use my whole wall. Actually, I have one of my prized possessions I have a Frank Miller, and I took it down so we could put it all up on the wall. So it's like the whole wall is used, and you should see my studio and Nick's here. It's nuts.
Didn't Noel do that? He just did the soundtrack for
Yeah, the guy who did the soundtrack for White Boat did that giant, beautiful painting, and people were asking before. This is my comic page that so when I was 13, my dad and I went to Big Apple Comic Con, and I waited. It was my birthday actually, and we waited for 3 hours for Todd McFarlane, and I had like a couple $100 saved up. And we finally got to him, and my dad was like, "My kid loves you. He wants to be a comic book artist and writer, and it's his birthday." And Todd gave me this page from Spider-Man 319, which was like way more expensive than any. I mean, it was like thousands of dollars, and I had like a couple $100. And he drew me a Spider-Man on the back and wrote "Happy Birthday, Scott," so in webs, so it's on the back of that thing. And I still remember like the kid joy and the gratitude and feeling like if I ever get to do this ever, I want to be like that guy. And then funny enough, like years later, I met Todd at a show when I first broke in, and I brought that because I knew he was going to be here. It was for Geek Time for Howard Stern. I was like, oh my God, look. And he was like, that's so cool. You owe me about $10,000. And I was just like, ah, but he was super nice. So anyway, all right, it's great. I can't believe there's so many of you. I'm so excited. So I'm going to give a quick intro, and for new people to the class, like how it works. So we've been doing this now, this comic writing 101 for few years, honestly. It's honestly one of my favorite things to do in life. I really, really look forward to it. We try and do it once a month. I'm committed to doing it once a month this year now that the Witches Writers Room is over and I have more time. So we're going to do once a month. And what we do is we try and pick a really isolated craft topic. So for example, we've done like openings, or we'll do villains, or we'll do emotional conflict versus plot conflict, or we'll do three act structure, or we'll do endings, or a narration versus no narration. And what I try and do is I think of it almost like not sort of a class where I try and tell you what kind of stories to write, but instead to kind of inform you about how all these different kind of craft elements work, the effects that they have. So for example, like we'll do a class and talk all about cliffhangers and how to an emotional cliffhanger versus a plot cliffhanger, an up positive net positive cliffhanger versus a net negative one, which is more of a oh my god did they die versus like oh my hero's about to kick ass, and what the effect of each of those things is, so that when you're writing your story you have a better understanding of how those things can be applied one way or another. And so that's the goal. It's really the golden rules of the class for everybody I know that has been here before and knows this because we've gone over it a lot. But they're the sort of two rules from the two best writing classes I ever took mixed together. So the first rule is you can only work on and write the story that you would love to find the most that day on the shelf. It doesn't matter to me what it is, whether it's a space opera or it's political, it's a memoir, it's anything at all. And we do use student work in the class too. Like we often look at published work and then we'll bring in a student piece as well and look at that too sometimes. And the second rule is you've got to try and remain the most exciting writer to yourself that you can be. And for me, if I come in here and I talk about those things and then selfishly, it makes me feel like a hypocrite if I don't go back and try and follow my own tenets. So I love it. I feel like it keeps me young, getting to engage with you guys, looking at your work. And it's a blast. I'm very, very grateful to get to do it, even though I'm busy and I have kids and all that. This is a real highlight for me. So I really appreciate you being a part. And so the way it works is like I'm going to go through a topic for about half an hour, 35 minutes or so. And then when we have a special guest, like we do tonight with Kelly, so grateful. Kelly is one of the absolute best writers and best people in comics. She's done incredible work with so many different characters from Black Widow. She's like the creator of Jeff, you know, has won Eisner's, and now she's working on Absolute Wonder Woman and just knocking it out of the park and completely redefining the character. So very, very grateful she'll be joining us by audio and talking about reinventing superheroes. So tonight, that's our topic. Tonight we'll be talking about reimagining superheroes, and superheroes can be licensed characters of any kind, right? And one of the things I wanted to start with is to talk about why now a little bit. I've been thinking a lot about this. When I was at New York Comic Con, I had to give a talk to retailers one night, and part of it was about the down market. It was sort of the topic they suggested me talking about was like talk about how it's been a down market, but now it's not going to be anymore. And I thought a lot about it, and you know what I realized was that um, over the last kind of 15 years, it feels like comics has been pretty inflated for a lot of reasons, right? Superhero comics in particular, but comics in general. So like when I started, and forgive me, you can say in the chat if I'm like talking too much and you want to like get to the stuff, like I try and really respond to you guys. So tell me if I'm like, you know, down my own rabbit hole and you know, talking too much shit. But the what I realized looking at the last 15 years and some of the hits and some of the sales charts and all of this when I was preparing to talk about this was that when I started at DC in 2010, 2009, 2010, it was just DC Comics on 53rd Street and Broadway, and it was just comics. And then within a year, they were bought by Warner Brothers, as Marvel was bought by Disney, and soon they were moved out to the West Coast. And so there was this whole influx of money and excitement and coordination with movies that were about to come out. And so there was this whole new level of resources that got pumped in. You could do the New 52, and you could do TV ads and all of this, and sales really took off. And then soon after that, or around the same time, The Walking Dead really hit, and all of this as a TV show too. And so all of a sudden, Image Comics and all of the indies were really flush with money because a lot of movie studios and TV studios were looking for new properties and that. And then streaming hit, and all of a sudden, you know, they made deals with a lot of comic companies, and everything was getting optioned. And you know, there was a lot of speculation: is this going to be a TV show? Is this going to be a movie? And people would buy out like the first issues. And what I'm trying to say is that even then, when COVID hit, after the brief shutdown, there was a huge spike in sales because people really wanted to bet on comics, and the way they did baseball cards and variant covers went nuts. And so it's only in the last few years that people are talking about, oh, the market has gone down. There's a lack of excitement from buyers and this stuff. But what you realize looking at it is it's not a down market. This is the real market, like the non-inflated market. And these are the moments when it gets real for comic people, that some of the most exciting reinventions happen when it comes to all licensed characters, when it comes to creator owned stuff too. But today we'll be talking more about licensed stuff. So that's when like Marvel Knights was born. That's when the the Dark Knight Returns happened in the 80s during a real lull. During the 90s, that's when Bendis came in and talks openly a lot about him going to the Marvel offices and seeing the furniture being sold and stacked up and worrying that he was going to be writing the last Marvel comics of all time. And that's when he does Ultimate Spider-Man and then Avengers. And it's equally over at DC when Jeff Johns really brought this whole Silver Age back in a modern way and revolutionized a lot of the characters there. And so my point is that during these moments of sort of real, kind of real market, I think real market leveling out, it's actually when the fans are so eager to show that comics are alive and well, and they're desperate for exciting takes and exciting stories. That doesn't mean you have to radically reinvent the characters. It can just be like big over the top stories, which we're doing in the main line at DC, whereas the absolute line is a place to reinvent superheroes, right? But the point is that you guys, fans out there, aspiring creators, everybody, like the fact that you showed up in force with this stuff, not just for Absolute, but for the whole DC line, but also for Ninja Turtle, for IDW's Turtles, for the Energon universe, for Ultimate Spider-Man and the Ultimate Universe, which is awesome. It's such a great moment, and it's exciting to be a part of it on my end because it feels like this fuck yeah moment where it was like, see, this isn't a down market. This is the real market, and the real market, this is selling more than anything that we've sold in a long time. Over the absolute stuff is, well beyond any projection by 3 or 4 times. And that's the exciting thing, not to see absolute Batman or whatever. That's always, obviously that's nice, like to see the sales, really high on that stuff. But it's more exciting to see the overwhelming enthusiasm and exuberance that fans have across the comic market. And they're selling out indie books too. Like, they're selling out Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees and James Tynion stuff. And they're selling out, Spectrograph and Distillery books are going back to print. And Boom books I saw just today going back to print. So it just feels like this is the real market. And the real market is also like the best time to be thinking about taking your biggest swings. That's what the absolute universe, that's what we're talking about today about reinventing heroes, okay? Reinventing characters. So what is it when you reinvent a superhero, right? I've had a couple chances to do it, like both in, Black Label type stuff or whatever, but also in the New 52. And when I was in the New 52, you really could do almost, there was a lot of like, do you want to change the origin? Do you want to do this? And at that time, I really did not. I was very, very determined to try and do. I'm sorry, my 5-year-old gave me a cough. Do the opposite and just show that everything that you loved was still there. The New 52 didn't fuck it up, didn't get rid of it. It was all there. And so I was very much trying to kind of be a gardener and preserve that all his Robins were there and this, and just make new things within that context. And so this actually is my first time, even though we got pretty far out with that Batman with 0 year and started to reinvent our version of it. This is the first time with the Absolute Universe that I've really gotten a chance to sort of completely reimagine the character from ground up. And it got me thinking about like, what does that mean, right? What is that? What is that? What is the responsibility of that? Like, how do you approach it? So let's say to you, and you can say in the comments, like, let's say someone said to you, all right, Spider-Man right now, like you get to start Spider-Man over. What do you do? What do you do? How do you approach that? Like, where do you start? It's so big, right? It's so daunting. Is it, oh, you start with this costume. I'm gonna redo that. Or, you know what? I feel like I need new villains. I'm gonna do that. And what I would argue is that the same way as people that have been in the course a while, will recognize like the same approach to when I try and give a lesson on genre or give a lesson on character building or give a lesson, it always kind of comes from the same place usually, which is, or it always comes from the same place, which is trying to figure out what it is that matters to you. Like what are you trying to write about? So these characters, I saw some people asking like, how do you write superheroes in such a crazy moment, a depressing moment, a scary moment, whatever sort of, and again, like my politics, I wear them on my sleeve. You see them on my stuff. I don't really bring them onto social media because I find it generally useless. But my point is simply that I saw people being like, well, in this moment when things are so volatile and everything feels like it's topsy-turvy, how do you write superheroes? And my whole experience is the opposite of that. That's not the problem. It's the exciting thing because these characters exist to make us brave in the face of the things that we're frightened of. That's the whole purpose of them, right? Like, and they each have their own set of skills and their own set of kind of heroic values to be applied to things. So one character might not be the right one for this or that, but what you need to do, in my opinion, the first thing is you burn the character down to the purest version of themselves for you, right? So what is Batman? Like, and today what I'll do is before we'll have Kelly come in and about like, 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes, but I'll go through a couple reiterations of Batman over the years and try and make this point, which is that the best versions of the reinventions are the ones where the creators are clearly grappling with things that they are afraid of and hopeful about in that moment in time. And they're applying the character to those things. It doesn't mean that they're applying the character to a hot button issue at that time. They can, and that can be a part of it too. But it means that the character is engaged clearly, like with things that this writer, this creator, this creative team is wrestling with at this moment on a personal and passionate level. And that's what you start with. So for me, what is Batman, right? What is he? We'll get back to that. But let's take a look at some of the reinventions of him. When we get to the absolute universe, I'll tell you about like how I kind of thought of it this time. And we'll invite Kelly in and she can talk about how she thought about Wonder Woman at that time too, and what how we kind of decided on our approaches all around. Am I going too fast or is this good for everybody? You guys good? Feeling good? Yeah, awesome, good. Any questions too? You can put a couple in there so far. If there's anything you want to say, I'll jump in for a sec before I start diving in. You good? Okay.
I got one question. Just get
Oh, and look, this is Tyler. Come here, Ty. Ty is my awesome assistant for the last few years. He runs you'll see him a lot if you're part of the class. You'll see him in like, he runs all of our stuff. He's like best assistant in the world. So, and crazy smart movie buff and comic buff. So he's awesome.
I have one question from Ronnie. What is a good balance of trying to work on a comic book script and you have to balance family, work, and just general
Oh
procrastination?
man. Well, that's a general question. How do you balance work and life? I have not been good at it at times, and the last 6 months were really rough. And the writer's strike pushed the Witches writers' room on top of DC All In, so it was sort of the worst period of work in my entire life, where I feel like I really missed out on the whole summer with my kids, and it was bad. So the way that I balance it in general is that I have really strict hours. I take my kids to school and I come back and I work from 9 until 3 when they come home, and then I try and spend time with my family. And then when they go to bed, if I need to go back to work, like tonight after the class, I'm going to work because I have lettering due on Absolute Batman. I really want to nail it early. Um, but I keep really strict hours. But it was a huge problem. We don't have to get too into this, but when I first got onto Batman, I mean, it almost like ruined my marriage, all this kind of stuff, because I love questions like this because I feel like we don't talk about the realities and business of writing enough in these kind of classes. So I do classes where I talk about things like the work-life balance. I do classes where we talk about pitches and page rates, and making a living. How do you make a living doing comics? What are royalties? What is an exclusive contract? All that kind of stuff. I love talking about because I feel like being transparent and informing you guys is both interesting, for you, I hope, and also really important. Things I wanted to know when I was coming up. But it's a constant struggle. It's a constant struggle because, when you're a writer, like what you're doing is staring in the mirror of the screen and trying to put something that matters to you in there all the time. And what are you afraid of? What are you hopeful about? And that's very hard to shut off. It's very hard to shut off for me. And, sometimes I'll find myself with my kids and I'm still thinking about a story, and I'm trying really hard to be better about that. But there definitely been periods in my life where I've fallen way too down a rabbit hole because of work pressures and that stuff. So it's a constant struggle, constant struggle. But anyway, okay. So reinventing superheroes. So Batman, let's talk Batman. So some of the best, let's look at a few reinventions really quickly, and then we'll talk about Absolute, and then we'll bring Kelly in to talk too. Um, but so if you think about Batman, like Batman's had all these different iterations over the years, like Spider-Man has and all of this, but when you look at, like, for example, the first time I really encountered Batman that mattered to me, beyond being a kid and loving like the 1960s show, which I adored, you know, when I was very little, in reruns, like I'm not that old, but still, was Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams. Like I would that run to me, reprinted, was just like, you know, gold. But when I was looking tonight, it was fascinating because the story, like the last Joker story, right before their famous first Joker story, Joker's Five-Way Revenge, is this. Like it's literally, here, I'll pull it up so you can share. I'm gonna try and share my screen. Forgive me for my, oh, did that work or no?
Yep, we can see your screen.
What's the zoom though? Here we go. Is that good?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. All right. So this is the story. It's John Broome, I think. No, it's, I can't remember, but here it's Batman. Death comes at the end. Oh no, this is the, sorry, this is the other one. Here, I'll pull it up. That was my bad. Here, Detective Comics. Here, this is the Joker story. So Batman and Robin, the Joker is giving you the honor of being the first men killed on the moon. This is John Broome, and sorry, art by Bob Brown, Joe Giella. So I'm not going to take a huge look at it, but essentially it's kind of as crazy and fun and bonkers as you would imagine. Where Joker, essentially, it's here in the folder, and everything will always be in the folder for you to look at yourself at any point. But like, so in it, Joker convinces Batman and Robin that he has trapped them on the moon, which here you can see. They wake up in spacesuits, and here they believe that they are on the moon, and he is a phantom in the sky, and he's going to be the number one criminal on the moon because, you know, he's already regarded as the number one criminal on Earth, and by doing that he's going to kill them on the moon. And they realize they're not on the moon, and they take him down, and it's absurd. And this is 1969, right? And so this is at the end of a long period of campiness and kind of buoyancy in the Batman comics, and silliness and fun, and it kind of like, comics are almost that have this Andy Warhol self-referential kind of playfulness, and they're for kids and all of this. And then all of a sudden you hit this, right? You hit here.
Or is the 4 year gap between the Joker showing up in any comics?
Yeah, 4 year, right, exactly. But then when you hit here, let me share my screen correctly now. Ah, what did I do wrong? Sorry, I'm awful. Oh, I'm sharing, right?
You're sharing.
Okay, there we go. So now immediately you can see it's darker, right? Neil Adams brings these shadows, he brings menace, he brings suspense. It has a noirish feel. Joker is not fucking around. He's scary from the moment you see him. And I remember reading this story collected. Look out, the Joker's back in town. There hasn't been a Joker story in years. Look at this. This scared me as a kid. I remember this. You know what I mean? Even this, from the darkness of a country road somewhere north of Gotham City, and from the greater dark of a past filled with evil comes a terrifyingly familiar face, right? And well, it might be for death is abroad this night, the Joker's five-way revenge. And from the very beginning, look at this. It's immediately noirish. Here's, you know, Batman comes to the crime scene. Commissioner Gordon is there, and all of a sudden we see immediately Joker has poisoned this poor guy. It's horrific already. It feels spooky. And as the story goes, like what I'll show you, not only is the art, beautifully kind of evocative in its shadows and its impressionistic qualities and expressionistic qualities, right? Look at this, the movement lines, all of it. He goes to talk to Packy White to be like, listen, I need to know about the Joker. And of course, Joker has already booby trapped Packy's water, and Packy takes it. And then all of a sudden, ha ha ha, real funny. And then this terrible grimace, his eyes going the wrong way. Batman's frustrated. And all I'll do, like, if you look too, it gets even darker. You know, he's like, ha ha, yeah, I bet it's a cigar, the old exploding cigar gag, right? Yes, exactly. And then all of a sudden, blam, boom, he blows up the whole apartment, kills him. He hangs this poor guy next. And what I'm trying to say is that the story itself is really, really well crafted. It's a great mystery, so you should check it out. It's in the box. But right away, what you see happening is that Batman is transformed from sort of Batman and Robin doing these things to this kind of solitary detective who is also haunted by real scary crimes. And the 1970s, I again, like, it's not, I, you know, I wasn't alive like during the 1970s in any real way, but historically for, young people in the class too, like it's a time of tremendous anxiety. There's worries about social unrest, like the idealism of the 60s had crashed. There was, government corruption. There was a feeling of cities falling apart. There was this sense of decline in kind of American identity abroad. There was Nixon, being impeached. There was this real sort of disillusionment and darkness and a kind of entropic feeling. And serial killers were this strange new phenomenon from the late 60s into the 70s. Terrorism was kind of, a newer thing too. And you see this in Batman right away. Joker is this kind of this mass murderer, and he's very different. And all of a sudden, Bruce is going up against these things, and he's going up against them in a way that's no longer funny, that's really directed. And you get a better sense of the hauntedness of his mission, how lonely he is, and how much the world is more oppressive. It's not just these kind of silly or fun out there characters. And then we have in the box too, Ra's al Ghul is introduced by the same team. Ra's al Ghul, eco-terrorist. There's problematic things with that characterization that you can, has to do with the 70s and all this stuff too. But ultimately, what you're seeing, my point is simply that what you're seeing is a reinvention of Batman that has to do with what Denny and Neil were sort of frightened of and seeing in the world around them at that time. And Batman becomes the vehicle to be brave in the face of those things. Do you know what I mean? And then again, with the 1980s, what you see with Dark Knight, if you look at literally the story that was coming out around the time of Dark Knight Returns. Here, I'll share my screen again. Am I going too fast? Does this all make sense? Is everyone following me okay? Okay, good. This comes out the same month as Dark Knight Returns in January 1986. Death comes as the end, and it's got the more sophisticated or the darker art. It's gothic and this stuff, but it's literally, I couldn't quite follow it. It was about a guy, this woman Nocturna, and death is chasing her, and it's very sort of mythological, and it's high melodrama and all of this and this stuff. It's not located in a city that feels like Gotham is not, a realistic place. It's this kind of, again, impressionistic, almost like Cabinet of Dr. Caligari kind of feeling place. And there's supernatural elements and all of this and so on. And this is kind of Batman, and it's not bad. I'm not saying that at all. But in the 80s, again, like the temperate, the sort of the cultural anxieties and the zeitgeist has changed a lot, right? And instead, what people were afraid of were like the Cold War. And there was this whole discussion about gangs and urban decay and Reagan and being a war hawk, and was there going to be a nuclear war with Russia? And has the United States like passed its prime? And then all of a sudden here comes Dark Knight Returns, right? And Dark Knight Returns addresses all of those things immediately, and it completely reimagines Batman and reimagines Superman and all of the heroes as this whole cast that's sort of contextualized within this kind of ecosystem of hopes and fears of that moment. And it was so powerful. I can't explain to you what it was like to read Year One and Dark Knight Returns as like a 10-year-old kid. I still have my original Dark Knight Returns issues in my storage here, all beaten up. But I mean, I grew up in New York City, and all of a sudden seeing him walk the streets that looked like New York, even if it was this kind of, Frank Miller exaggerated version, but dealing with worries about Russia, and Reagan was in the book, and Superman was stopping nuclear missiles, and all of it was so real. And it ushered in a new era of, again, of Batman being someone who was, darker and dealing with kind of the things that you saw around you. And so again, like that. And then the last thing I'll look at again before talking with Kelly about the absolute universe is Batman Beyond. There have been so many reinventions of Batman, but I'm just trying to give you examples of how the whole mythos, the character, and then the mythos around him, the villain, the cast of villains, the Robins that are formed, and I'm doing tremendous shorthand, but again with Denny and Neil set of Robins, you know what I mean? And then in the '90s, like Robin, and so on. But here, when you look at,
Make sure you're sharing the sound too.
oh yeah, from the video.
Yeah.
So this like blew me away. So in the '90s, right? There's you. I mean, you guys are. I'm sure most of you were born in the '90s, you know, or born by the '90s. There's, you know, this whole kind of discussion in the '90s and late '90s about technology because the internet is brand new, right? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And cyberpunk is this brand new genre, and all of a sudden, all these great mangas and there's all of this kind of influx of uh, of of anime and manga and there's this whole kind of excitement around the genre with William Gibson and you know, Blade Runner and all of these kind of dystopian sort of visions of how technology is going to affect things. And then all of a sudden, here comes Batman Beyond. And I don't want to take too much time at the begin with the. I mean, I love the Batman Beyond beginning. It's a whole. If you haven't seen it, it will be in this box again. But here I'll show you. Like I won't take the whole 4.5 minutes because I want you to I want to get to talking. But what I will say is what it is the cold open of this series. If you watch the cold open, it takes place with Batman older. Yeah.
No sound. Sorry, one sec. You can just pause it for a quick sec. Stop the share.
Oh, what's going on?
Stop the share real quick, and then share it again. Share.
Oh, it's okay. We don't need the sound or anything. It's fine. Don't worry about it. My point is that my point is that this cold open, what happens is Batman, Bruce Wayne, without getting there, he shows up, he's older, and he shows up in this awesome bat suit, right? And he goes and he takes down the criminals, but they get the best of him, just regular criminals. And the only way he can stop them is he picks up a gun that they drop and fires it at them. And you know, if you know Batman's, you know, core rules, like in continuity, he never uses guns like real guns in any kind of lethal way or points a gun because of what happened to his parents. And him breaking that rule makes him realize it's time to retire. And so after that, here he goes and you see all the Robins and Batgirl costumes. You realize it's later, and he goes and he closes the cave, and it ends. And it ends on this thing, and then all of a sudden here, if I take these out, then will it go to the sound?
Maybe.
I don't know. Let me just try it. See if it works. Tell me if you can hear it.
Applicated. What? Our sound is so good. Well, how do you do sounds? It's worth doing, and then this is the last thing I'm going to show anyway, so it's worth because the sound is badass.
Okay, one
Here.
second. Let me just mess around with it quickly.
I think you're getting advice from people. It's here behind it.
Here, one sec. I'll share.
Yeah, Ty'll share it.
Yeah,
It'll
you
be
need
easy.
to for a quick sec.
Yep, I'll mute myself.
Swear this is all worth it, guys. Just stop share.
Here. Don't worry about it. But you should check it out. It's in the box for you guys. So you should totally take a look. But even the song, like when you take a look at it, it's immediately apparent. It goes to Gotham and you're like, oh, it's Gotham City.
Sean shared in the
Behind
chat, like the full opening.
what?
Sean Mills just shared in the chat for everybody to listen to.
Oh, okay, awesome. Yeah, it's right in the chat, so you can take a look. But behind Gotham, if you look, like all of a sudden there's these huge buildings appear that look almost like sci-fi. And you realize this is Neo Gotham. Everything's new. And Batman looks young, and you see Bruce Wayne is old, and there's brand new villains, and these words flash like apathy and courage and this. And all of a sudden the feel is like, oh my God, I've never seen Batman like this. And even that cold open is saying to you, we're tearing down everything. Batman, you just saw Batman do the one thing you'd never thought he would do. He looked fallible and he used a gun, and now we're throwing it all away. Not really, because he comes back. But it really says to you, we're doing something different. And immediately, as you know, I was what was it, 99? So I mean, I wasn't a kid, but I was young, and I was like, God, this is so exciting. And I was so skeptical. I was like, oh, this is not going to be good. And then when it started, I was like, this is fantastic, because new villains like Ink and Blight and all these ones, and they fit the times. It felt like, oh man, it's corporate espionage, and it's worries about tech nano stuff, and it was so, it made Batman so immediate all over again. And so what I would say, and I'm going to let Kelly in now to talk about what she what reinventions have mattered to her, and how she approached absolute Wonder Woman. But the thing I would just say is that, again, the thesis of the class is that when you get a chance to take on a character like Batman, or any character, if you get hired by any company to do a licensed character, let's say you have no elasticity. Let's say they're like, we want you to pitch, and there is no room to reinvent the character. Same priority. What is it that you want this character to make you brave in the face of? So for me, when you think of Court of Owls or something, right? What I was terrified of when I wrote Court of Owls was the history of Batman. I felt like I was nobody. I was like 1 year into writing superhero comics, and I was writing Batman #1. I was like living in a constant panic attack. That's the period where I was working way too much, and almost like my marriage was really rocky, because I had my dream job all of a sudden, but I didn't even know why I got it. And it was just this feeling of like being plucked from like single A baseball, and you're playing in the World Series, and you're like, this is my dream. I can't say no. But the point is, the Court of Owls, what it was it was me being like terrified of the history coming to life, just as you feel confident enough as Batman, writing Batman because you were doing Dick Grayson for a year of Black Mirror. For me, all of a sudden it comes to life, and it's like, we've been here hundreds of years, and you've been here 2 seconds, and you don't know anything about this city or anything, and you're just nothing. You're just a speck. And that's where it came from, was putting your own worries and up against Batman, and Batman makes you brave in the face of those things. So right now, whatever you're feeling about the world, whether you're feeling angry, whether you're feeling motivated, whether you're feeling, these characters are designed to be vehicles for that. When I was afraid of having a kid, the death of the family literally is Joker. When we had our second kid, Emmett, my career was suddenly taking off, and I was making, the money in the family when my wife was still in school. And I was like, all of a sudden I was supposed to be the one at home taking care of the kids, but we were making a living off of what I was doing, which we never expected to do. And so when we got pregnant again, I was like, oh my God, what if I'm a terrible father this time? What if I care too much about my work? What if I don't want to be a dad? And all those feelings worked their way into Witches, worked their way into Death of the Family, where Joker shows up and says, you don't really want a family. You just want to go back to being me and you. And that's where it comes from. So my point is, if you look at the stuff that I've tried to do with Batman, whether you're reinventing him or you're literally just on the book, the thing that I'd say to you is, whenever you get a licensed job, you have to treat it like it's like creator own, where you're putting yourself into it and being vulnerable and saying, what is this character? How do I use this character to make myself brave in the face of the things that scare me about the world, about myself, about human nature, about problems, that whatever. And so that's where it begins. And when you have the elasticity to reinvent things, and now we'll talk to Kelly about this too. all of it takes on that. How do you reinvent all of it through that lens, you know? So let me see, Ty, will you help me get Kelly in?
There we go. Asking Kelly to unmute.
Hi.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you? I loved your class. Thanks for letting me come by.
Oh, you're the best. Thanks for coming by. I so appreciate it. I know it's like nighttime and everything, and we're all crazy busy, and you know.
I'm on the West Coast. It's still early for me. I can still write pages when this is over. That's the plan.
I know.
I'm very behind after the black hole that was last week. So yeah, I feel you on the work-life balance. You have a lot more going on in your life, but I am also bad at it. So it's a pretty common problem in our industry. I also just think it's hard when you love what you do like we do. You can't make it your whole life, but like I'll be out with people and I'm like, "Ugh, I wish I was just writing at my desk right now." Like, and that's not a comment on anything else. It's just how much I like my work and how much I am excited about what I get to do. And you can't let that catch up with you though, because you have to build other parts of your life or you're in trouble.
No, I always feel guilty though when I'm like, I'll be at like my kid's soccer game and through my head will be like running witches or something, some abominable thing where like kids are being eaten and that stuff. And I'm like, you know, the
It's
cognitive dissonance is terrible where I'm like,
it's easy to beat ourselves up, but it's not a bad thing to love what you do. We're very lucky. So
we are. And again, like I'm so grateful for you being here. You've done so many amazing reinventions and also just super work and creator owns with the Black Cloak and with the Cull and all this amazing stuff, but also your superhero work, the way that you make these characters your own, whether it's Black Widow or Wonder Woman, I feel like and Scarlet is really top notch. So in terms of like in reinventions or kind of takes on a character that took them in a brand new direction that were important to you, you know, over the years, are there ones that really stick out as like, oh, this was a moment I realized, you know, I want to, or this is the moment I realized like I want to aspire to take a character and make them mean something to me the way this story hit me.
yeah. I think the big one, and I didn't honestly think about this a lot when I was doing Wonder Woman. I don't even think I thought about it until we started talking about this conversation. But now that I went and like reread the issues in prep to talk about it, I was like, oh, yeah, I tried to do a lot of these things without even realizing it, because this is a major reinvention for me that is actually even a little trickier because it's not an alternate universe or anything, which is the Greg Rucka, J.H. Williams Batwoman stuff
Batwoman, yeah.
from 2009 that was in Detective Comics. I think Tyler put for you guys to Detective Comics 854, which is the very first issue, and then
Yep.
also 859, which is an incredible arc that includes like flashback stuff that's a little bit more like the stuff we're doing, I think, in Absolute, where it's sort of intercutting between status quo and like how you got there. Um, so in some ways, the second arc is a little more like the kind of stuff we're doing. But in that second issue, or in that, sorry, 859, she has her encounter with Batman that sort of puts her on that path when she's lost. But she's also not a victim. And like there are a lot of really incredible things about how they portray that. You know, Greg Rucka and J.H. Williams, just absolutely incredible team doing incredible work. But one of the other reasons I picked this to talk about, in addition to how important it is to me, is that in a weird way, I think it really applies to a lot of the other choices you made. I mean, it's much more serious than like Joker trying to kill Batman and Robin on the moon because the moon landing was a hot topic. But, you know, gays in the military was a big thing, especially around this time. It was a huge hot button. This came out in 2009, which is a couple years, I think a year before they repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell
Oh, yeah.
and things like that. So it was very of the moment. And I think speaking powerfully about people should be able to be the people they are, and showing Kate Kane, this incredible hero, complicated, flawed, but beautiful and interesting and truly searching to do something good in the world, to find her place in the world. It's a really powerful story. And I think it goes a lot to the kind of stuff we're all doing in Absolute titles, I think it probably the feminist elements of it are probably more relatable to the Wonder Woman title in particular. But it's really incredible stuff.
It so is. It's such a great pick. I mean, I remember viscerally waiting month after month for that book as that was coming out. And, you know, JH, like that, those layouts, like I
Oh,
had never seen anything like that. And the difference in style, like for anyone looking at this, as Tyler is going through the art, and don't go like slow down a teeny bit, is like all of this is the same artist. Like
yeah,
that painted panel in the middle is the same as that clean line is the same as that.
yeah,
Like all of that repertoire, and it felt appropriate because it was about somebody discovering who they are. It was about dark forces in Gotham and magic and all of this kind of stuff that was coming back to, and that feeling of it being just explosive. You know what I mean? And I just love this so much. I
yeah.
love it so much.
Another thing that's crazy. Well, and also let me say I can't take credit for this because Hayden's layouts on our Absolute Woman book are completely his own their own brilliance, not have nothing to do with me really. But it is funny to look at those incredible J.H. Williams spreads, which I'd forgotten, and see that I'm gonna have to talk to Hayden after this class and ask if they're a big fan of J.H. Williams, because I can definitely see like similar ways that they think about page layout and stuff. I think J.H. Williams is a little more graphic in how they approach it, but really similar interest in how to break up the page and how to tell the story, which I really, really love.
Yeah,
The other
great.
thing I was going to say is that additionally, in like the sort of political element of like this being part of it, very of its time, and like a really great push forward for the character and for what we believe in comics about, you know, about heroes and about doing the right thing,
Hmm.
is that, you know, this also was, you know, the Batwoman character was originally, at least from what I've read, what I understand, was sort of mandated because there was a lot of rumor. They were trying to put a kibosh on the whole Batman and Robin are a
That's
couple.
yes.
Yeah, and
Sure.
so to reinvent her and make her an out gay character and make it a core part of the story and the narrative, and then to also do the way in which she was inspired by Batman, I don't know. I think it's one of the best reinventions I've really ever gotten to encounter, and I think it's even more impressive, both for DC being fully supportive of it and clearly going all in on it, and also for it not even being an alternate reality take, which is
Mm-hmm.
usually the only time, but usually is the time you get the chance to do that. You know, you sometimes get it, like I got it a little bit on this Scarlet for Energon and stuff like that. So you can get it like that too. But you know, barring the alternate reality, you sometimes don't get the the wide berth that they gave this book
100%.
here, and it's incredible.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think like, you know, again, like one of the things that's great about these moments when it feels like comics doesn't necessarily serve as many masters as it has over the last 15 years. It's still
Mhm.
like these two companies are still owned by multiple companies, but there is more, I think, kind of freedom all of a sudden because those companies are all figuring themselves out. And I think like superhero comics and licensed comics feels a bit more free. Is that now are the times when you generally get a little bit more freedom than you did before. So for anyone
Yeah.
out there that's like aspiring and pitching, you've got to just be fearless about the way that you pitch this stuff, you know, and the way that you think. And even if you're making your own proxies, I mean, like I was thinking about bringing this in and then I just didn't think we'd have enough time, but you know, we're talking about licensed stuff and about superheroes, but if you're not getting a chance, if you're starting out, you know, you're not at a point where you get to pitch for, you know, DC or Marvel. Look at things like, you know, Irredeemable and Invincible and
Astro
Black
City?
and yeah, Astro City, exactly, and Black Hammer. And there are ways that you can reinvent the characters on your own terms and your own creator own work as well, you know, that way. And you see a real elevation of that stuff now as well. So, but I mean, again, like it's a great moment, I think, for people trying to figure out what these characters mean to them and how to apply them to things like Kelly is saying that matter. You know, you can't be afraid of doing those things, you know.
I do think boldness tends to win the day. You have to have you have to have it down to back it up. Like it has to be really good. You have to have really thought it through. You know, don't expect anything you bring in is going to get holes poked in it. That's part of the job of making sure it holds water. It's sort of like a less intense version of like political oppo research, right? You train a team to come in and poke holes in what you're trying to do because you have to be able to make it work. And so nobody's going to just go, oh, this is so cool, and then just say yes. But if you can convince them that there's something there in a bold take, if they can't poke too many holes in it, you might really have something.
Yeah, 100%. Somebody just said they're excited for Martian Manhunter, which Kelly like just read too. Because
Oh my God, you guys.
you, Dennis is speaking of people that like reinvent characters. Like you have people right now working in the medium that I think are so daring and great. Ram V, the way he's rethinking New Gods, the way he approached Detective Comics, and Dennis Camp, who's doing Ultimates over at Marvel in an incredible way, did 20th Century Men, and now is going to do Martian Manhunter in the Absolute Universe for us with Javi Rodriguez, and it's like such a great big swing. It's again, it's just exciting to be a part of at this moment, you know. So, was there anything else? Was there another book or anything you wanted to mention before we talk Absolute, Kelly?
I think those were the only reference I sent in, so they're probably my best bet. Although I have to say thank you. This is gonna sound a little sycophantic, but it's been a while since I picked up Batwoman Elegy, and man, I really enjoyed rereading it, and it reminded me like what I want to do in comics, why I love this, what the bar is, and like to keep going for it. It's really it's such a high bar, and I'm excited if we're even close to it. And I do feel like the Absolute books are. I mean, they're some of the coolest things I've gotten to be a part of for sure. I'm very grateful to DC and Scott for like
Yeah.
just kind of getting that we could see what we were doing and that we had a really good idea and like letting us run with it. It was really exciting.
It's just again, like I'm really grateful to you for being a part of it. I mean, again, it makes me, I said to you when I read the pitch and I'm like, I have to up my game, you know, it's great. It's fun. It's fun. And the main
That's an insane compliment, but
line,
thank you.
no, and the main line is so fun too, what they're doing over there. There's some books coming out that we can't talk about yet that you guys are gonna love, I know. And again, I'm not shilling for DC. Like I've always tried to be, as I wear my like my swag that we got on our one retreat where like it was like a Stop the Bleeding retreat in like 2015, where everything was like falling apart and it was like a hey, don't quit. So I wear all my swag from that. But the I'm not shilling for DC, but what I am excited about, and I think Kelly can speak to this too, is that people, it like all in, the goal of the initiative from Go was always that not to put anyone out front, not to try and favor new takes on the characters versus the main line, but to create an excitement across the line about all kinds of superhero storytelling, whether it's Mark Waid and Dan Mora on Justice League Unlimited, which is going to be awesome. And I mean, it is awesome because I've read the first couple issues and it's great. But for you guys, it comes out soon. Or some of the books coming that I don't remember what's been announced yet, so I don't want to spoil anything. But New Gods, for example, and all this stuff like Metamorpho. Oh my God, Al Ewing's Metamorpho, but also like just the coordination. The stuff coming in the big meta story, the way Ram is going to take a lot of center stage, building some of the dark side stuff, and there's just a lot of fun stuff right now. And I think again, speaking to the ethos and the air, it's just kind of like, you know, it really pissed a lot of us off. I think that discussion that was like, well, superheroes are over, comics are kind of down. And you know, it fires you up where you're like, no, like, you know what? Like there's great stuff happening and people aren't noticing it. Well, then let's give it like a bigger stage and let's all kind of just prove that comics are not only alive and well, but like superhero comics in particular, but also that they're, you know, telling some of their best stories. And we can always, this is where these characters are reinvented, where they're reborn, where they live their biggest, most majestic stories as well, like in continuity. So all of it at once. And it feels that way. So when you kind of had to think, so when I called you and I'm like, all right, we're doing the Absolute line, Wonder Woman, yeah, and again, because I don't remember if it was about Wonder Woman, or if it was about like there were, you know, it was whatever you want to do, and Wonder Woman was one of the things that was open.
I think when we talked in the like a year, like in 2023,
Mhm.
I think it was more general and it wasn't necessarily specific to Wonder Woman. I think you were still figuring out what all the pieces were and things like that. I don't think we were scope locked on Wonder Woman for sure until you came back to me in like spring of this last year or winter,
Yeah,
whatever it was.
it's like, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, and it was mostly Wonder Woman. I think I mean, listen, it's what I would have grabbed for. I mean, I love Batman. Everyone wants to write Batman, but A, I knew that was not an option. And B, I always wanted to write Wonder Woman. I mean, she's neck and neck with Batman, but I was very intimidated. Like, um, in part because, you know, Tom King is doing a very powerful Wonder Woman book right now. I know it's controversial for some people, but it's some of the best that Wonder Woman book has ever been as far as the attention and care it's getting. The art is second to none. And so you look at that and you go, wait, we have to be the other Wonder Woman book? Like it's pretty intimidating. And so I was pretty nervous, but you know, you take that call and you gotta show up. So
Well, so sorry, I was saying my 5-year-old, he was really funny today. He was like, "Dad, I gave you my cough." I was like, "Yes, you did." But he was so proud. He was so excited he had done it. He's like, "You did. You gave it to me." But so when you begin that process, right? When it's like, okay, Wonder Woman is, you know, you from the ground up, you can do anything because that was the idea. Was like the idea is you stay true to core. It'll be Diana, you know, but you want it to be something that feels more exciting or resonant just in a personal way to you. So everything is pliable. Everything is kind of, you know, everything is changeable except the core values of the character. So where do you start with that? Like what was your process?
Well, so for me, I think the first thing I started doing was I just wrote a bunch of notes about what I feel Wonder Woman is and like where, you know, what's important to me about her to retain. I then went and started reading a bunch of old stuff, mostly that I'd already read before. I think I picked up a few things here and there that I hadn't actually read before, but I read a lot of Rucka and Simone and some Perez and Jimenez like stuff, like just sort of sampling from all of it a little bit. I think, you know, Rucka has some of my favorite Wonder Woman plots, so I really looked at some of that stuff. But Gale has a slightly softer, funnier Wonder Woman. That's actually the first Wonder Woman I really fell in love with. Like, it was after reading Gale's Wonder Woman that it opened her up for me and she became different. Even when I would go back and read Greg Rucka's, I now just liked her more. And so I enjoyed everything about it more. And so but honestly, after I read all that stuff, I was really struggling. Not because I wasn't inspired by it or wasn't interested in it. You read those stories and you're like, she's done everything. She's been everything. How am I going to find? And I'd also reread Dead Earth and I looked at the Earth One stuff. Like, you just start to feel the handcuffs of it. Like she's been everywhere. She's had hundreds of thousands of stories. How am I going to bring something to this? And I was getting very nervous because I was burning Runway that I knew was really important to you and everyone. So what happened was I started rereading Historia, which is a 3-volume series by Kelly Sue DeConnick and Nicola Scott and Ha and Jimenez. Yeah, so it's incredible. And I think there's only one on here. It's which one is it? Book one. So this is Phil and Kelly Sue.
Yeah.
All of them are spectacular. They're a lot for any of you who haven't seen it before. Like there's no training wheels on this book.
Yeah,
It
it's
it
tense.
it
It's like,
starts from the very beginning, so you're not it knows how to tell itself, but like you can see the intensity of it every page. And while they did different stuff on the other 2 books, it's similar, even though the styles are different, it's just similarly engrossing and creative and inventive and weird and wild. And rereading it, I was like, you can't do the origin better than this. They've mastered it. And I'm not even going to try to, especially, I'm not going to be able to do it better than them when I'm doing it within an ongoing book that needs to be telling its own story that isn't this, right? So I used that as the basis for a lot of inspiration for how I wanted to build this Diana. And so treat Historia as sort of like a good non-canon way to look at what a version of what her origins might be. You can't look at it as pure canon because we're in a different world. And so a lot of these things would have happened differently because of the dark side influence and all of that. But I think it's a really good base for the kind of things we're trying to talk about, the kind of uh, uh, sins and power and belief that we're trying to impart.
Yeah.
The other thing I reread was I'm sorry, Kingdom Come.
Oh yeah.
And I particularly read, we only have one issue in there, I think, in the Dropbox, but it will give you an incredible look at what it is and how incredible, how brilliant it is and prescient in a way, just for comics and for what it could do, I think. But there's also, if you guys like this, there's a absolute, it's not called an absolute edition. I don't know what it's called, but it's got all the scripts in the back. It's like an oversized deluxe thing. It's got like scripts in the back and process stuff. And it's really, if you want to write comics, which is what this class is, I highly recommend that book because I found it hugely inspiring. And it really gave me some great perspective on remaking icons. Like, what can you bend and what can you break and what should you not break? And that was a lot of the problem I was having with Diana. And so Kingdom Come was really informative to what heights I should reach to or try for, and maybe what you shouldn't do. The biggest problem I was having was a lot of the takes had been seen before, or they felt like they were depowering her in some way, or making her, God of War, Wonder Woman. A, we've seen it before, and B, I don't know that that makes sense to me for who Diana is, like at the core of it. And I also knew that whatever we did, it was going to have a crazy intense design. And so I felt like there had to be a real heart and a soul to it to balance that. And it was in my notes, I had all these scribbled out, crossed out notes, and among them was which Wonder Woman raised in hell by an enemy. And then I think nearby I had written Circe with like 5 question marks. And when I wrote that, I was like, yes, that's it. That's it. I can write that. I know what that looks like. I think that's going to slot together in an amazing way. And honestly, guys, it was more than anything I've done before. It just sort of opened like a flower. Like sometimes you just hit the right vein and it just sort of does a lot of the work for you. And I was very lucky that that happened because I was a little behind because
No,
I'd
I
already
remember.
burned a lot of time. Yeah.
I remember when we spoke about it and you told me that. Like I remember I was in my house walking around and I remember like stop walking because I was like, that's the best idea I've heard, like, ever about, a take on. I loved it from the moment you said, and it was like, you've got to do this. You have to write this. This is going to be great. And then once you have that, so let's say you're like,
Yeah.
I have it. I have the core thing. She's raised in hell. She's discovering what it means to be an Amazon. She's still Wonder Woman. She's still got these core values, but there's this whole new context and all of this new stuff. Where do you go? Do you go like, okay, I'm building my outline now? Do you start building out the cast? Like just for process, because some of the students
Sure,
here,
sure.
they're
Sure, sure.
one of the things I try and say to them all the time is that, process is really personal. Like, so for me, I do need to know like, the end of a story before I start, but I have a really good friend who, if they know the end of the story before they do their first draft, they feel it's really boring. So they love to explore,
That is
and
a
figure
high
it out.
wire act.
Yeah. And well, they give themselves enough time to draft and then go back and redo it before they have to hand it in. But they love kind of figuring it out through the writing, where I like figuring it out in outline. So all I'm trying to say is one of the things that's fun is inviting people on stock process while always saying to the people listening, whatever, whatever your personal process is, trust your
Yeah.
own process. But
I
it's
think
fun to
that's really
hear.
good advice.
Yeah.
That's really good advice because you can't force yourself into someone else's system. The best thing is to listen to, I think, other creators who you like their work and figure out if one of them says something that also makes sense for you. I think for me, it's outlines all day. That's because my first novel, I got lost in the woods because I did not have a good outline, and it took me so long to write that first novel. I'm slow anyway, and it took so long, and it was so scary to not know what I was going to do. So from there forward, I was like, outlines from here on out. I will say, with one exception, which is that the first volume of Black Cloak, I I had it loosely plotted. I knew where we were headed, and I'd done all this world building work and everything to build a whole new universe, right? It's hard. So I had a lot of information. I don't want to act like I was doing it on the fly, but I kept hedging on pinning down the ending. And it did end up helping on that book. It's the only time where it's happened to me, and I'd be hesitant to try it again because it was scary even in that form. But I do think we ended up with a better book because I was a little more flexible as we were going with the things that seemed to be really working. And like Meredith would create this new character, and I'm like, oh my God, that's my favorite character. I gotta find more ways to put them in here, you know? And so I think there were some things on Black Cloak that happened. But I will also say, because that was a book I was paying for myself through Substack, we had a lot more leeway. If we wanted an issue to be 26 pages, then fine. And so that's why we ended up with like a 180-page trade. But in general, outline, and especially for anyone new to it, that I don't think you'll ever regret it. Even if you throw your outline in the trash, I just don't think you'll regret doing more advanced work and like pre-planning how it works. I think my number one issue for myself is I'm frustrated when I don't plan far enough forward because you miss a lot of opportunities. It's one of the reasons I love the way we've worked out Wonder Woman, because there are these very strategically placed, I don't want to say they're bombs, but yes, like they're really exciting or shocking things that are going to happen in the story. I think there are smaller ones in issue 2. I think issue 2 has to do a lot of heavy lifting because we pulled back so much on issue 1 by only showing a couple characters. So we're having like a more slow rollout than you guys have with Batman. And I think that's okay. But like in issue 3, I mean, there's a thing that I just can't believe people in the world don't know what's going to happen because I think it's
I
so
know you
shocking
told
and
me.
cool. You know. But
But
so I think that the planning is really important. So I went to work on the outline, but also I think I ended up building the Bible sort of simultaneously with outline, just because that's how it was sort of working. Like I would hit a plot point I needed or a character point I needed. And so I would just go ahead and flesh that out in the outline, what we were looking at, or in the Bible, what we were looking for, all the characters, locations, all that kind of stuff. I mean, like one of the last things that we developed was me deciding to place it in Gateway City. You know, we were sort of hedging on where it was going to be, what it was going to be. And I think I kept thinking, I'm just going to have to put it in DC because that's what everyone does. And I was like, why are we doing that? Why? Well, the Gateway City is a great idea. It would work great in this scenario. And so I just pulled the trigger, and it was one of my favorite decisions we made. So I think just because you're doing advanced work, it doesn't mean you can't still make some audibles, right? Down the line. It just gives you more options, I think.
yeah, and I think one of the things that was so exciting to watch you do was start from this kind of core place of what Wonder Woman is about in this world and how she's encountering it in a new way. And she's not like, one of the things that I enjoy about Tom and Danny's book is that she's so magisterial. Like there's a sort of she kind of is always on a pedestal in that book, and it functions that way well because it's this kind of tribute to Wonder Woman, I think, in a lot of ways. But what I love about what you're doing is that it's unpredictable, and she's messy and awesome and all of these things at once. You know what I mean? Where you don't
Thank
know.
you.
And she's still like purely Wonder Woman, but she's
Yeah.
coming at it from such a different angle, and the world is so much more challenging in different ways that everything is surprising. And the way that you were like, when you told me, well, she's gonna have a magic pouch, and out of that magic pouch, like on this page, a giant sword comes, and she's got lassos that are not the lasso of truth. And I was like, I'm like, can't wait to read. This is the best. But it all comes from that place. And it was so interesting to watch who Steve Trevor is in the series, and where some of the characters that people expect to come in at some point might come in, but all of the reinvention coming from that same place of how do we make Wonder Woman someone here who feels like true to core but is built for this moment. She's up against bigger challenges. She didn't grow up in a perfect Paradise Island. Instead, she grew up in a really confusing way, and yet she's still Diana, but she's bringing all of that to this, you know?
Yeah,
It's so
it
the
was,
title
it,
page I love. Like,
I love it. It's so good. I think I was really worried. Like I think a gamble that we played is that she she does look completely hardcore in this design that Hayden did. It's incredible. And because we put so few named characters in the first issue, it really left us in a slight disadvantage when we were promoting the book. It wasn't that bad because there was so many incredible visuals, but I could tell from the visuals we were showing, people thought she was going to be something very different than what's actually inside the book. And I was like, that's either going to backfire horribly because we're just not getting enough excitement and sales and everything. And it could have, I think, if there hadn't been such like what you built and the all in and the promotion and the force DC put behind it, it could have maybe not worked. But we got really fortunate that the sales were there and people were willing to at least try that first issue. And I think that a lot of the excitement people have about it is that it wasn't what they expected. She had this giant sword, but that was just because she was fighting a giant creature. And so it all made sense. And, you know, because people sometimes don't like the sword, although it seems to be that if you make it gigantic and put it in a magical pouch, they're all in. So I don't know.
wait, in
But it,
issue, I'm gonna do it in issue 3. You see Batman pull a magical sword out of a pouch out of a magical sword.
don't you dare, especially because I don't know if you remember this, but I originally designed it to be an axe.
I
And they
know
were
I
like,
do
and then they
remember.
were like, Scott's using an axe. And I was like, why does Batman need an axe? And then they were like, listen, it's really integrated. And then I learned about the symbol and all that stuff. I was like, all right, all right.
I,
Relax.
It's
Come
about,
on.
yeah, I love that. Like the other funny thing is like Nick and I, we had all of these like moments where we were like, okay, this is the thing that DC is gonna call about and say no. This is where, you know, they're gonna push back. Like for us, I think to speak to some of the stuff that you were talking about with Wonder Woman, like my process was, okay, first it was what is the absolute, because I don't have to get too into this, but Kelly knows, but you know, I wasn't going to do Batman. I was sort of just trying to be a monkey wrench and say like whatever book or wherever I can be most helpful to DC, I'll do that. And what happened was, you know, eventually after going to a couple people who we were thinking about for Batman, DC, James Tynion really called me up and was like, you know, you should do Batman. You've been soft pitching this same idea for the last year to everybody, because it was kind of the way that I explained how the absolute universe could work, ethos wise. And where it came from was, you know, I was like, okay, look, if we're gonna do this thing where we start everything over, what would Batman be today? And I was trying to think, like when I was doing Batman, it was always like, you know, you put yourself into the character and he goes up against the things that you're afraid of, like I was saying earlier with Court of Owls or whatever. But these days, like it's harder for me to imagine being Batman. It's harder for me to imagine what a young person who's Batman is, you know, when he starts over, he's 22, 23, what somebody like that facing the world would be idealistic about. And yet, like I have, you know, a 17-year-old who's the one that took my my AirPods, and I have like a 13-year-old and a 5-year-old. But the teenagers, to watch them look at the world and be angry, but also be idealistic and be like, they go, you know, we don't accept this. Like we're going to protest and we're gonna figure out, you know, ways of making this better, and we're not gonna be you know, just sort of throw our hands up and be apathetic about it. It's wonderful to see in that young generation. And so that's where the idea for this came from, where it was like, well, who would Batman be if he was born now? Well, he wouldn't be a generational billionaire, because that would, you know, not only is that uncool, but like to them, but it doesn't feel like that's relatable. It's never been relatable, but you know, but there's also like, it feels like the villains would be the generational billionaires. And so it wasn't as simple as like, oh, Batman poor, villains rich. It was, what if you invert it so Batman is the disruptor, Batman is chaos, Batman is what Joker often is, you know, without being, he's not evil and he's not like trying to burn it all down. He's not like a total anarchist, but he believes like if it takes breaking something to rebuild it better, because he's a civil engineer, then that's what he's going to do. And he refuses to accept what Alfred, who is my point of view character in the book, I was like, well, I'll be Alfred, who's old and also jaded and has been around the world a bunch of times and done things he's not proud of, and comes in being like, this kid is crazy and gonna get crushed in 2 minutes. And he keeps watching him win and be like, I'm gonna tell him, like, kid, you're up against the system that's way bigger than you, and you're just gonna get ground to pieces, or it's gonna hurt people you love. And Batman's like, so bring it, I don't care. And that was where it became so exciting to me, because it made everything new. It was an inversion of the whole mythology, where instead of Batman being the one that's order in the system and has the resources and the power and the privilege, instead he's somebody who has nothing and is coming up against all of those things. And it made me be like, the same as you, be like, well, what is what are his villains then? Who are they? And
Yeah.
maybe he would grow up with them, maybe they're his friends. And it's when I was on, I'll stop talking about this, but like when I was on Batman, um some of my favorite moments are not everybody else's favorite moments, right? Like, I know that it's always fun when you have like the big bombastic stuff that happens, but every once in a while you get to a place where it's like a quiet moment where you're addressing the whole mythology, and it's something where nobody has done it that way. And there's a scene where like Batman or Bruce Wayne and Joker wind up sitting on a bench together and super heavy, and neither of them are their characters anymore. They're both human and normal, and they have this conversation about, like, without knowing it, almost like why they need to go back to be these characters. And it's like one of my favorite things that I ever, and this whole, because it was so uncharted. I was like, I have no idea what these characters say to each other here. And then this whole series feels that way to me, where the whole mythology, like Jim Gordon knew Martha and Thomas, and they were all friends 20 years ago. And now that Thomas is dead and Martha is alive, like he and Martha are very close. And what is that conversation about Bruce? Because he's the one that found Bruce after the shooting. And the one thing that was, I'll say this, then I'll stop. But like the one thing that I told Jim Lee, like, so when I said to them, like, I was going to do Absolute Batman, and we went out to LA, and I was talking to Jim Lee, and I was like, we went out to lunch, and I was like, look, there's one thing that's really like deal breaker about it for me, and it's in the pitch, but I just want to bring it up to you because I know that, like, as the front facing person, like, you would take the heat, but I really feel like he needs to be formed in a shooting, of some kind, like a mass shooting where it's not in an alley, it's not his parents by a mugger, but my kids, like my 5-year-old, literally at his daycare, his pre-K, they have an escape window and they do these drills. Like, and for me, if Batman is made to go up against, be formed by the worst trauma, the worst fear, and then go up against those things, then it had to be part of the origin. And Jim was awesome. Jim was like, do it. I support it. Let's do it. I'll be
It
out there,
was it
you
was
know?
so powerful when you were pitching it to me, when you were talking about what it was going to be, and I heard about the origin and how it was all going to work. I mean, I just knew you had something, because I mean, there's a way for that to be done horribly wrong, but I knew you and Nick were not going to do it wrong. You were going to give it really real power and it be incredibly relatable for people. And you keyed into a thing that I really agree with about Bruce. Bruce Wayne is one of my favorite characters, but of all time, but he is really hard to relate to in a lot of ways because none of us are like him. Like, how are you going to find that? And so you've really broken that down. And I think you had that Batman Begins clip in the Dropbox as well, and it had me thinking about Batman Begins, and that one of the really smart things they did in that origin was he goes and becomes penniless and lives among the people. Like, how would a billionaire understand these issues and care about them, right? I mean, yes, he works because he was formed from this crime and we all love it, but I love this. This makes a lot of sense. It's very relatable. It's powerful. It's
And what I
exciting
loved
to
about
see it.
thanks so much. And what I loved about, I remember seeing Batman Begins, and one of the reasons we included those clips from like Spider-Man and Iron, Iron Man and Batman Begins was that I remember going to those movies and being so impressed with how, like Logan as well, like how engaged they were with the moment. Like seeing Spider-Man was like, the first superhero movie I remember seeing and being like, oh my God, the new effects with new effects, like all of a sudden you can do all this crazy stuff in 2002. And it was still raw. Like 9/11 was still really raw in
Yeah.
2002 in City. And that movie had so many scenes. It was so, whatever they did to retool it and all this stuff. Spider-Man was so one of the people going up against this person who was trying to terrorize everybody, and it suddenly felt so prescient. And I know they had to redo the final scenes that were supposed to be at the World Trade Center, and it all like was there. And then with Batman Begins, again, like what was it, 2000, what is it, Ty? 2005. The Iraq War was going, there was a pervasive sense of anxiety about terrorism still, about this feeling that people were responding to fear with their worst selves and being war hawks or aggressive and all of this stuff. And in hindsight now, like we all know that there wasn't, there weren't the weapons of mass destruction and all this stuff in Iraq that we were going to find. And there was this amazing, like that whole movie was Bruce trying to stop people from giving into mass fear. That's the Scarecrow is trying to put it in the water, and Ra's al Ghul, as kind of a terrorist in some ways, is trying to destroy the city by letting it tear itself apart through fear. And as much as it's a big, bombastic, fun, over the top Batman thing with the awesome Tumbler and the fight on the train, and at core, it was so moving to see it and realize like they're reinventing him to be brave in the face of something that you see now. And Iron Man felt that way in a very different way. Iron
Yeah.
Man felt like
Yeah.
a reflection of like being the warmongers and this kind of stuff. And is there a way to both be, to take this and take all of this kind of amazing American material and make it, sort of responsible in the hands of somebody who's good, and this fantasy about that, which is super powerful. But it was all like, when you think about how the Marvel universe and the DC universe, both cinematically, but in the amazing moments in comics, like where characters are reinvented, where things are, reimagined. It really is like, don't be afraid, everybody out there, of engaging with the things that keep you up at night. It's the only way to make it real. They can be political. They can also just be personal. Like I was saying earlier about things you're afraid of about your life or yourself. But whatever it is, like it's taking these characters and applying them to the things that matter to you, not saying, well, there's too much going. These characters, that I think the thing Kelly and I both believe at heart that we're getting at, these characters are not escapists. You know what I mean? They don't exist to just tell stories that get you out of your fears in your life. Their enduring power is that they kind of hold core values that we believe in, and different characters have different ones, but ultimately they exist for us to go up against the things that we're most afraid of. And so don't be scared of putting those in your pitch and your book, whether you're making your own superheroes or you're using characters that exist that you're hired to do, because it's the only way to make anything that matters. Nothing. The plot of Court of Owls is no different than the plot of The Black Glove, honestly. Like, it's no different than the plot of, I'm sure, 10 different Batman stories, secret societies. So if you start with plot and that stuff, it's never really going to be, in my opinion, unless you then somehow find a way to reverse engineer passion into it. But if you start with plot or what haven't I seen, someone's probably done it. But you can do something that's cliche in its plot if you really put yourself into it in a way that feels emotionally organic and true. And these characters come to life all of a sudden when you do that, because that's what they exist to be. They're full of life from the things that you're afraid of and hopeful about, I think.
I think that's really powerful, Scott. I think something people should remember is that if you're afraid of it and it keeps you up at night, it's probably true for other people. Like, none of us are an island. It's, the human experience is powerful and terrifying. And I think, or can be terrifying, but I think that what you said, I think there's real power in truth. I think people recognize it when they see it, even, and they're drawn to it, even if they don't understand that that's what they're responding to. When you say true things. They really do have power. And, you know, especially we live in an age of real misinformation and disinformation, and it can be hard to distinguish those things, but I feel like it still reverberates in our chests when we really see it. And I think building the books this way, speaking to those truths, is part of their power. And you know, I think the truths that Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman specifically speak to are slightly different here, but they're all sort of aligned. And I agree with your advice, like finding truth, finding the thing that's real to you. That's one of the ways to distinguish yourself as a creator, and to make your stuff sing in a way that, you know, piles of other submissions maybe don't. There's a very tried and true formula to making superhero comics about how much action you need per issue and how you have to end it to get them to come back for the next installment. And we all sort of learn that formula because, you know, sometimes you're writing 5 or 6 books a month and you need the formula to help you get there, to also meet the needs of a company that's contracting you to do this. But if you can find truth in that and can find something that's real, you'll be really far ahead. And also, don't forget to break the formula, because sometimes you need to.
Yeah, that's, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, and I think also like your favorite comic probably upset somebody at some point too. It's like, I keep this thing that Tyler can put in the box that's like this letter to the editors about Batman, where it's like, you know, I'm dropping this book. I'm never reading it again. You guys ruined Batman. I'm sure everybody's going to drop it. And it's literally about year one. It's like someone writing something about like how it's the worst thing they've ever. And think about the dare, like all these things eventually become canonized. Like even the stuff that I was showing today, like Joker's 5-way revenge. I'm sure that like was extremely upsetting to people picking that up and like, oh my God, this is so dark and violent compared to Joker on the Moon and whatever that I liked. But so don't be afraid, you know, that again, like it's always scary. And Kelly and I, like, we both were talking just the other day about how scared we still get, you know, about it. Like we're both, you know, we both get worried about like, is this too much? Is this working? Am I, you know, are people going to react poorly? Like it's always there. But ultimately, like what she said is true, I think, where it's, if you find some truth and you put it in there, the characters just come to life, you know, because they exist for that. They want to be brave, you know. And also, like, one of the things I'd say as a side note is that for all those aspiring writers out there, like comics needs you. Like we need new blood. I think, you know, there's kind of a myth that, you know, comics is just sort of, you know, like that it's there are all these like sometimes, and like I don't know if this is sort of a bad tack to take, but I'm just going to say it. Like I think sometimes people in the last few years in particular have been like, you know, one of the things that they criticize comics about in terms of a lack of excitement is that they think that there's been almost too much kind of experimentation with the characters and people trying all kinds of stuff and new writers and all this. And the truth is, it's like exactly the opposite. When you look at the lines over the last couple of years, it's almost all the main characters are written by established pros. And I'm not saying they shouldn't, you know, they're not amazing and they shouldn't write them and that stuff. And, you know, or any of that. But all I'm saying is the status quo right now, or the status quo when it comes to, you know, whose stories are being told, like we need new voices very badly from all over the place, from everywhere. So we need young blood. We need new people, because when you look at the people writing all of the books, and they're all people, like there's so many people that I love and I can't wait to read their stories. So it's not a knock on them. But there's also just I think there's so many spaces that are being created now, both at DC and Marvel, and also at all these other companies, hopefully for new people to come in and keep this vibrant. You know what I mean? So you should be writing about the things that matter to you. We need a lot more new people. We need new voices desperately, because I think it gets very calcified very quickly, you know? There aren't enough, I think. There isn't enough you know, diversity and also just young people and new people coming in. You know, I have a couple of students in the class who are older, you know, in their 60s and just writing for the first time, and their point of view is amazing. They come in with life experience and all kinds of, so we just need new voices is the point. you know, and the characters deserve new voices as well, like all these great heroes too. So please, like, if anything, like part of the point of the class, and one of the reasons I was so excited to have Kelly come in today too, because I know we both believe in this, is like, you know, comics needs you, and you should be excited to be a part. The class is designed to welcome you in terms of teaching craft, you know, just teaching the excitement about being like, how does a flashback work, or how does this, so that you can just tell your stories, you know, in that way. Because again, Greg Capullo always teases me where he's like, kid, he's like, even though I'm old, he's like, kid, you're training your replacement. You know? And I'm like, it's the opposite. I feel like the class is designed not to make people write like me or anybody else that we show material from, but to try and encourage you to write like you, and just to give you the tools to do that, to be like, here are the effects of different craft things. Here's the approach that I would take if I was reinventing. And the approach that we're both espousing, I think, and telling people is write from yourself, your fears, not ours, not what we would do. You know, that like put yourself into it. And that
But
creates,
also, even
yeah.
if you are training your replacement, like, I don't know about you, but like that's a sharpening edge for yourself. Like, it's, you know, if you can be replaced, then I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think you're right that all those diverse voices and ideas, they only sort of spurn you on to like what's next and make you think a little differently. It's I've always sort of I don't have children. Scott has several charming male children. Several charming children of various ages, but I've always thought like the having kids is like a weird combo where in a way it ages you, right? Because suddenly you have to be the adult, like bottom line, that's who you are.
All
There's,
just
you
for
know,
men and plastic
but
surgery.
it keeps you young because you're constantly being exposed to their exciting openness to experiences and how they see things and how they process things and why their opinions different. And so I think that talking to young writers or old writers, but people new to it, I think those voices are really important. Obviously, I'm a big champion of more diverse voices makes us all better for it.
Yeah, exactly. And it just makes the whole, you know, the whole landscape more vibrant. And it makes us like it again, like it doesn't, it's inspiring, you know, it's not threatening to me. I mean, like, you know, I feel like at this point, don't you feel the same way? Like your only real competition is you know what I mean? When it's like trying to always be fresh and exciting and to yourself, like going to the page and being as hungry or fearless as you were when you were starting, you know,
Yeah.
and trying to do that. And if you approach it that way, like, I don't know, it's the same. It's like everybody coming in. It's not like there's a new Kelly or a new Scott. There's somebody exciting that has their own thing they're doing.
Yeah,
You know?
I think you're right. I mean, I'm a very flawed person. We all are. I am highly flawed. But and I think I very easily like look self-inward and become like petty and competitive. And but I know it's wrong. I can feel it's wrong when I do it. You can feel that it's the wrong way to be, like as a person, as a creator. One of the things I'll deign to mention Marvel a little bit here. You know, I was under exclusive with Marvel for years, and so I got to go to a bunch of summits before the pandemic sort of killed those. And um, it was so informative to me about how people behaved in that room. I came at a very beneficent time where sort of the leaders, quote unquote, in the room were like Jason Aaron, who's like a soft-spoken, amazing, brilliant teddy bear guy who is always supportive and encouraging. And like Jonathan Hickman was like in the background for a lot of my first meetings because he was building the X-Men stuff, but it wasn't really on front deck right yet. And I think Al Ewing was one of the people that really opened my eyes more than anything, because there's a way to be in that room where people go, oh, well, you can't do that with Wolverine because we're going to do this thing in May with him over here. And there are people, and I would include myself in this, which is why I don't have a problem saying this is a problem, is that they would shields up, right? They would be get protective of their idea, they would not be collaborative, and they would be petty and competitive. And I'm saying I was one of those people. And it was watching other people. I would say Al Ewing was the number one guy who was good at this, in my opinion, but Jason was certainly one of them too, where they hear you say that and they go, oh, you know what? If I change this other thing here, it could actually lean into your idea and we could work together on that and make something better. And I just saw him do that over and over, Jason too. And I was in
Yeah.
awe of that. And I was like, this is the way to be. So when you feel yourself being petty and competitive, you can be like, okay, I'm a flawed human being and I have those characteristics, but it doesn't mean I have to give in to them. I know that the other better way is to be collaborative and open and inclusive and diverse. And so I think we just have to look to ourselves, like, especially if you're going to try to write something. I mean, when you're writing superheroes, it's a high bar. Like they're better than you. So you have to write to them. Like they have to inspire. And these are all good, positive things to reach for.
I agree, and I was very lucky. I had like Grant ahead of me on. I mean, I had. Look, I'm not here to spill tea, but I've experienced the opposite too at times, where there are you sometimes you'll encounter people who are competitive or who are this, and it's rough, you know. And but I was lucky, like I had Grant ahead of me and at DC, and he was so encouraging from the beginning, where he was like saw me freaking out and he would pull me aside and he was the one that was like, give your Batman a birth and a death and then he's yours and nobody else's, and then you can, you know. And so I think both of us, like, you could say like 99% of the people in comics are, you know, wonderful in all those ways, and they're looking, because it's such a deeply collaborative medium where you have to be vulnerable to the artist, to, if you're a writer, to the everybody, the editor, the letterer, everyone, the colorist, so that you're always kind of, you're always making something together. And so you can't have, I mean, generally, like, unless you're really an outlier, you can't have that kind of ego where you're like, this is mine and this is it, you know, and nobody can be this. So it lends itself to that kind of, I think, more generous spirit. And I see a couple of people, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, go ahead.
No, no, no. I was just agreeing with you.
I was going to say, I see a couple, I just want to tell one quick anecdote, and also I'll let you go in a minute, but the I see a couple people being like, I'm in my 40s and starting, but I'll tell you, like, so when I went to grad school for writing when I was very young, like, right, I took a couple years off after college and traveled around and worked odd jobs, and then I went to grad school. And you know, there were a couple people I remember, like, most of my friends at that time in the class were in their early 20s and this stuff. And there were a couple people that were older, that were in their 40s coming in, and it was for prose. And I remember there was one woman who had really not written much at all in her life, and then one guy who English was a second language. He's from Columbia, and they had both they really worked on their submissions. They're very polished. And then when they got to workshop, it was like, God, this stuff it feels really rough. It feels like it has a long way to go. But they were great people and all this. And I remember, like, there were other people in workshop who were so talented and, you know, very young and all this. And when we graduated, and what you start to see is some of the people that were, you know, young and talented in this, but didn't have that same kind of perseverance about, like, getting rejected and keeping up with it, and that stuff fell away and did other things. And meanwhile, these two people, Hillary and James, I still stayed friends with, and they kept with it. Hillary had, you know, moved here from Texas after a divorce and was working on the stuff. And I still remember being like, God, it's going to take a long time. You know, it's going to take a while for them. And about 5 years after graduating, they stayed in close touch and kept working on the stuff. Hillary wrote a book. She was working on this book the whole time, Mudbound, which became this massive bestseller and then a Netflix hit. And James wrote The Widow's Town, which was about growing up in Colombia, in a town in Colombia, where all the men are taken away by rebel fighters, and one boy is left alone in the town, and all the women sort of mother him, and he grows up. It's an amazing. And my point is simply, like, the two people that started the latest and had a way to go in the thing, they were dedicated to it and had tremendous success with it and wrote like incredible, meaningful, impactful work. So I'm a big believer in that, like of it's never, never too late at all. And all the difference between the only thing it takes is like dedication to sticking with it in those terrible moments when you're like, I'm not inspired, you know, it's like, because I'm sure you were there, Kelly. I was there like when
Yeah.
before I broke in. I mean, I broke in when I was in my early 30s, and like before that, I broke into books, but there was a big period before I sold anything in books where I was, you know, broke as fuck and writing at 4 in the morning before teaching at BOCES public school, and then tutoring on the weekends and working at Starbucks and working at so as much as it seems like, oh, we've been here and we've been working in comics a long time, like it's always tough to break into anything. And there is no differentiation if you start when you're in your 40s or 50s, or when you start young, or if you start super talented, or you start where you have a way to go. It's just a marathon, you know, in my
It
opinion.
is a marathon. It is a marathon. People hate this advice, and I understand why. It feels trite, and it's particularly hard to take it from people who seem like they're really succeeding, or that they've done what you want or what they want, but or what you're trying to go for. But I do think there is real truth in don't give up until you did it. Like, which is just don't give up. Like, you just have to keep going. Like, if the only way to fail is to give up, like, because otherwise you're like, if you're still trying, then you didn't fail. So just keep pushing it. The other advice I always give, which I think is more appreciated though equally as difficult to do, is just finish something. One finished thing is worth 10,000 things finished to 90%. Like, I don't care how many good ideas you have in a drawer that are at 90%, one finished thing, that's what you need. I think a lot of people, including me, make this mistake. We all creators make this mistake because the shiny new thing is easy and exciting, and you're thrilled to get involved in it. And the thing you've pushed to the 70-yard line is full of problems that you're still going to have to solve, and it becomes very frustrating that this shiny thing you can't work on, and you have to deal with this problem child. But the shiny thing is an illusion. It is not a thing, and you'll never get to it if you don't finish the thing. So
That's some of the best advice I think, like in the class ever. Like to me, it really isn't like even when I was saying earlier, some people don't know where they're going when they start. They give themselves enough time, the people I was talking about, to finish a draft and figure out where they're going before they wind up having to write it under deadline. So it's the same thing where it's like whatever your process is, finishing the thing before, whether it's your outline and then writing it, or it's writing it to completion and then going back and redrafting. It's like that. I had a friend that had this Truman Capote quote like pinned over their desk that was like, editing isn't the cleaning up after the party, it is the party. And it was like the implication that you've got to finish it and go back and work on it after it's done. It's not like, oh, like you're saying, like the great idea and a half finished thing. It's, I don't know. I'm a big believer, I'm sure same as you, that like there aren't like thousands and thousands of amazing comics that are gate kept, but there are like a lot of comics that would be great but wind up not getting to full draft or second draft or the drafts they need before they go in. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Because that's the part that really can be rough and sucks. But you know, that's the
yeah.
part that puts it over the edge.
I would also say it's it's fine for there to be an ebb and a flow to what gets you to the end or what keeps you going. Like, because most of that for most of us is like a love of it, right? A belief in it, an affection for it, it is core to who you are, that it's a thing that you can't live without. And that's all really positive and inspiring. But it's okay if sometimes it's petty or spiteful or angry or like whatever it is, because there's truth in that too. There's a famous Kelly Sue DeConnick quote that that I really love, that I think about a lot. I certainly thought about it when I was doing Absolute Wonder Woman, which is that Captain America gets up because it's the right thing to do, and Captain Marvel gets up because fuck you. Like, and I think it's okay as long as they both got up. I don't really care what the motivation is there. You have to keep going, and whatever you find that, wherever you can find that in yourself is helpful and it's instructive. And what it is for this one project might be not what you find for the next project, and that's okay too. The important thing is to keep going and keep getting up.
Yeah, and set realistic goals for yourself too, you know, where it's like, and stick to them. Like, you know, I saw somebody say like the hard thing is finding like the sort of clean, well lighted space thing, and that, you know, like I'm lucky, like at this point, every once in a while, like now I have a stretch where I can have that, where after the writer's room's over and now like my kids go to school and I come in at 9. But I'll give you an example, like today I had this whole work day planned. um my kid got sent home from school early with a cough that he was so proud of me. My my and then the seatbelt didn't work in our car with his seat thing, so I had to bring it in to get it fixed because his car seat couldn't go in without it. So I had to bring him to do that. Like all these things happen. And so what has to happen then is like, you know, I'm gonna have to wake up really early tomorrow and work, like wake up at 5 before I have to take him to school and do it, or work tonight. And do I feel like doing that? No. Like, am I inspired in that time? Like, no. But it's to training yourself to be like, even now when I've like have a life that I've built the time to do it, things will interrupt it. But before, like before I broke in, I mean, like I said, like, you know, it was waking up and writing for an hour and a half or an hour at 4 in the morning before driving to go teach seniors and in high school. And that was it. And that I was like, I'm going to do it every day for an hour. And that was what I could manage. And if you commit to it and train yourself, like, this is my secret real job. My other job is not this is my real job. You know, it trains you to be able to demystify it, where it's not like everybody is inspired when they write. Like the truth is, like 90%
Yeah.
of the time, you're not. When you sit down, you're just like, "Ah."
No.
But then as you get into it, it can become wondrous. It can be a bad day but the trick is like, and then I'll shut up about it, is like, to me, writer's block is like the fear of writing something shitty when you really feel like it's going to be shitty. And the trick is being like, I'm going to sit there anyway. I know I'm going to write something I'm embarrassed by today, but I'm going to do it anyway. And the triumph is sitting there and writing it. And sometimes you'll surprise yourself and write something you love on a day like that. But a lot of times you won't, and you'll write stuff that you don't like, but you did it. And that's the achievement, is you sat and you did it, and you can go back tomorrow and fix it, you know?
Yeah, if you're waiting for inspiration, you'll be waiting a long time. Like it just doesn't come like that. It's not like a movie or something. It's just hard work. And if you love it, it's ultimately enjoyable at certain times, not all the times. But
Yeah.
I think that demystifying it is smart, Scott. I think that's really good advice. It's just work. Just sit down and write the pages. The other thing is, nothing you're writing is fit. It's not like what you wrote has to, especially if you're trying to break in or trying to get a toehold or whatever. It's not like what you wrote. It's just between you and the computer or whatever, and your notebook, whatever. You can turn it into anything later. It just has to be what you're, just a start, just a draft, the beginnings of what it will become.
Yeah. And I wrote American Vampire, the pitch and the issues. I literally wrote it. I remember like when I was teaching, I was tutoring rich kids for the SATs and teaching and I wrote it on the LIRR, like going back and forth into the city for this stuff. And, you know, it was like people on their phones and whatever. And, you know, you do whatever you can, you know, like but committing to it and being like, there's no glamour in it. Like, it's like there isn't like inspiration, like you're saying. There's total magic sometimes, like when it hits and you're like, you're writing and you love it and you love what you're making. But if you expect to you wait for that to begin, you'll never finish anything. And you've got to like, that, you know, go in and be like, I'm doing it when I don't feel like it. And that's, I think, what separates like Hillary and James and the people I was talking about before from, you know, people that had it a lot easier, but, you know, didn't do it when it was really not easy to do,
Can
you know?
I give some hopefully encouraging advice? Because it's really hard to listen to finish a project and do it until it's done and don't give up and keep going. But
Yeah.
let me tell you a secret thing. that will hopefully make all of you guys feel really good. If you can get whatever you're working on to 100%, if it's complete, you're miles ahead of almost everyone else that tries to do this. Like I'm
Yes.
telling you, people can't do it. People, how many people do you run into and they're like, "Oh, I'm writing a novel." That novel is never going to be, for most people, that novel is never going to be finished, even if they're talented. I'm not dismissing people who
Yeah.
start a thing and can't finish. It's just it takes an incredible amount of work to take something, to create something from nothing as a writer and get it all the way to be a fully complete thing that someone else could digest and then have feelings about or want to edit or whatever it's going to be. And so the trick is you don't have to beat everybody. You just have to get to the end. You just get to the end
Yeah.
and you're ahead of most of the pack. So like set that as like a small goal to keep yourself encouraged. Like once you hit the end, you're ahead. Now you're in. Now you're in it in a way that most people never get to be. And
The-
what you do with that is powerful.
That's so true. And I feel bad. Like I planned on like, we're like way past like when I was gonna be like, oh, we should like, I didn't want to keep you on, is what I mean, Kelly. But like, it's been so awesome talking to you. And again, like some of the best advice I think we've gotten in the class in the last couple years. And again, like I'm so grateful to you for coming on, but also just for the work you're doing as an inspiration to people out there and to me too. And it's a joy to get to work together on all the absolute stuff, but also to cheer you on everything you're doing otherwise.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It was a really good time. I love what
Yeah,
you're doing over here. It's very cool. And
really fun.
writing Absolute Wonder Woman has been, I don't want to be dramatic or emotional, but it's been one of my favorite things I've ever gotten to do. So
Well, you're killing it. And it makes me, what? Oh, Tyler says there are a few quick questions. Also, like with the questions, I just want to say like you should all go and subscribe to Kelly's newsletter on Substack. Also, like we'll put it in the we'll put the link in the box, Tyler? Is that how
Yeah,
it
they'll
works?
be on the post tomorrow.
On
and
the
then
post.
put in the chat.
Yeah, and please, she's so many amazing books from her whole career. Go pick everything up, like from Absolute Wonder Woman right now, but also like we were saying, The Cull, Black Cloak.
It's Jeff is.
It's Jeff is amazing. One Eisner, like so many great things. So go support all of her work and follow her on Blue Sky and on Twitter and everything else. And for people wondering how the class works in general, it's like every once in a while we'll do a free one like this and you join. The way that we keep it going, or like for Tyler and everything else for is that we have a tier where it's $7 a month, or you can pay for the year. And what it gives you access to is not just the class that we do once a month, but also all the classes we've done in the past. So we have like, I think almost 30 now in our YouTube archive. And again, there's like conversations with all kinds of people from comics, but also just craft lessons and all that. So if you're wondering and you want to sign up, great. If you don't, you want to just stay on the free newsletter, awesome. Totally up to you. But again, like we just really appreciate you showing up and being a part of it, because we just love doing it and want to keep it going. And it's been really fun to watch it grow over the last couple of years. So hit us, Tyler?
Really good questions. First one. For reimagining characters' looks, are you leaving the new up to the artists, or are you providing descriptions for them to go off of, or is it maybe a little bit of both?
That's a great question. Do you want to start, Kelly? I'm just going to get another water.
well, so I would start, but it was a little garbled, Tyler, I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I gotcha. Hi. Okay, so Kelly, for
Hi.
designing characters for the Absolute universe, are you providing descriptions, or are you leaving it up to the artists to interpret, or are you leaving them up to them for design it themselves, or is it a combination of the two?
Well, so in the case of Absolute Wonder Woman, Hayden, I think it really depends on your relationship with your artists. With Hayden and I, we didn't know each other really. We're brand new to each other. So it was a little bit of a trick of like, I don't know what this person's going to do. They don't know what I'm going to do. And so you're finding your way a little bit. And I think every artist writer relationship is different, and finding that what's right for them and you as a team is sort of the whole ball of wax, quite frankly. But Hayden is incredible and very fast. So I think we didn't talk a lot about the design before they began, but they did have the Bible and the outline, and so they very much knew. Oh, and someone asked before about the Bible. If you're still here, I saw it in the chat. A Bible is just like a big world building document sort of thing, which has got all your characters and your locations and like important stuff that's going to happen that you guys want to go back to. You know, you can always change it. We ended up changing some things for some of the supporting characters, especially that are coming in, Etta and Barbara and Steve. So it's not like it's like a living document. But the more you have of that at the beginning, especially when you're starting an all new world like this, is great. So Hayden had the Bible, and so they very much knew what the vibe was and what we were going for. They also had a pretty detailed outline, so they knew what kind of stories we were going to be telling and like what the needs were, which is a great place to begin. But I don't think I gave them any really specific notes. And so, like, for example, their first pass, they had, I think there were 4 Wonder Womans on the sheet, and they were all really great. And I was like, oh, this is going to be great. But none of them had pants. They all had the skirt. And I felt like the skirt felt a little too Greek and a little too classic Wonder Woman. And then I said, if I'm growing up in hell, I want pants. And I also want pants if I have to ride a dead Pegasus. And everyone was like, that makes a lot of sense. And then I think there was also, but we were all a little worried about it because like the sword, we knew that pants has not always gone well for Diana in DC Comics, and we didn't know if DC was going to freak out or whatever, but everyone was like, okay, we'll try it. And honestly, the first pass Hayden did, I mean, they sent another like 4 designs, and in one of them are those like cool wrapped red pants, like right from Go, they were there. So
I
it was,
remember when you sent those, and I
yeah,
have it in my photos. I'd share my screen with it, but I would have to find it. But I remember being like,
yeah,
I remember I
I,
was like, maybe golds because I
yeah,
was like gold, and
well,
I was like just for the W because I was thinking of the Trinity next to each other.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Nobody has gold and this and that, and then you were like, no,
We were like, no, there's a cool color scheme. They're like a cool
you were totally
toned
right.
color scheme. We can't put this warm gold in here. Also, I was just worried about how Diana that feels, how
It
classic
feels
Diana
good.
that feels. And
Yeah.
especially a lot of what was helpful for Hayden, I think, was that, you know, the absolute Wonder Woman design. I mean, she built this in hell with her mother. So we knew we would be like, it should be a little more rough and ready. It should be a little messier and like homemade even, you know, which hopefully will make it fun for cosplayers at some point. But
Oh yeah.
they would have limited materials. Like they've got a lot of magic and they do have access to things as we're going to keep learning in the book, but it's still limited. They don't have access to anything they want. And so that also informed the design. Um, but I think when Hayden sent that second pass, it included the full armored look with that helmet and the like fur bit at the top
Oh
and
yeah.
everything. And we were like, oh my God. I was like, I mean, I think that's it. Like we made a few little tweaks to that design. And when we had to we made some tweaks to what it looked like under the armor also. And we ended up adding the pouch, which by the way, I was like, I mean, it's already so busy. We can't add this pouch. What are we going to do? And Hayden was like, let me try it. And they sent over the sign. And I was like, oh my God, it's right there. It's so perfect. So it was really great. It was super fun.
We had some missteps, I think, initially for me and Nick. Like, I had not missteps, but like his very first image was this, the first one was the one I showed before, and then his first design was spot on, and it was like
Oh, good.
it was just so good. I was like, oh, that's great. But the cape we really struggled with because I had this crazy idea at first. Well, I was like, I knew I wanted the spikes, and I told him that, and I was like, the spikes, but it didn't make sense that I was like, well, what if the cape? And we went through this whole thing where it was like, because we were like, well, he's friends with his villains. What if Edward Nygma like helped him design a cape? By the way, like when it says Scott Snyder sharing or I'm commenting in the chats, that's Tyler impersonating me. I don't want you to think I'm distracted talking like or chatting while
You're just that good.
I'm that good. I'm that fast. I hold my hand. I'm like doing with my toes. But so we were like, oh, what if Edward Nygma like helps him develop like a nano thing, and it like can wrap around his arm, and it's like this was after that, but it was right after that. I don't think there's one in there that shows it. But this is some of Nick's designs, but you can see from the expanded, there are a couple things like where it's doing things that still look a little nano, where it's like forming shapes. It can harden into shock shapes in this, which we took away. Look, he wrote, "It is not symbiotic. It only does what it is programmed." It's like in very loud letters, because he was like, but at one point we had it so that like the spikes, it is like a programmable cape, and it goes around his arm, and it like creates this almost like huge arm with he has like like an arm of destruction, where it's just like, and it looked really cool. And then one day Nick came over and he was like, "Before we start, I got to tell you something." And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "I don't think this thing works, this cape." And I was like, I feel the same way. Like, what do we do? And he's like, "What if we just make it a fucking cape with like things in it that he just built, and we try this?" And that's when he came up with like the walking, and it was great. And so, for us, it was going back to the original question. All I gave Nick was that I felt like, because we're being subtractive, right? We're taking away all this stuff from Bruce, because he's someone that's being watched by a jaded Alfred. He needs to be like this force of nature. And I'd never seen a Bruce who was young, but like bigger than the Dark Knight Returns Bruce. And it was like, what if we do that? And he's this force of nature. And like, he's more utilitarian. Like, he needs to be more violent. I had the axe, and I had the things, the ears. And it was like, he has to be more violent because he doesn't have the tricks, and he doesn't have the sophistication. So he's intimidating you. He's a smart, but he needs to show them like he will not stop and be this almost like beast. And the cape was the last thing where it was like, I want the cape to do something we haven't seen. We want it to be a weapon. And then when we finally nailed it, where he was like, "Look, if it has bars in it and it can adjust, and this is the skeleton of it," and you see it in issue 4 with 5 with the skeleton, when it gets like burned off, he can walk on it and do this. And it was like, perfect. But so I think the key, to echo what Kelly was saying, is to give your co-creator just enough to give them like the meaning of what you're trying to do. Like for us, it's like he's a beast, and everything on him is utility. Everything is a weapon. Everything is scary. He's almost a little alien, in the way he works. And then let Nick go. And if they need more, they'll tell you, but it's meeting your artist where they feel best, and giving them, again, it even goes to scripting, where it's like, again, this isn't what you asked, but it's, when you're working with somebody, try and ask them like what they feel most comfortable with. Do they like full script? Do they like Marvel style? Do they want to talk on the phone? Do they like references? Like, and try and adjust as much as you can while still doing your best work to what they like, because you get the best stuff back,
Well, and I think that's really the thing, right? Is that the best thing you can do for the book and for both you and your collaborative partners is to give them the room to do their own cooking, because not only will they do better work if they feel ownership of it and excited by it, but you guys will get better ideas, because you're going to get better if you're both in love with this idea and both of you are cranking on it all the time. You're just going to get so much more cool shit to work with than if you're off on your own cooking and then handing something off that you want to be executed. It's much better to collaborate and be more collaborative together. It's not always going to work if you do a lot of work with a lot of other artists. Like, I think every artist I've worked with is very good, but that doesn't mean they've all been a great fit for me. Like, some are just better fits than others, and you'll find that too. It doesn't mean if you're not a great fit, you can't still make a good book. You can, but finding those people that really are really perfectly aligned with your same goals is huge, and you know it when you find it, and you try to work with them as much as you can, because it's magic.
I agree 100%. I mean, it's even people like, sometimes, I mean, like, you can go out of your comfort zone a little bit with, like, for
Mhm.
me, there are people that like work in a way I realize like I don't want to work that way. Like, I had a couple people I was working with who they just want to get the script, and they don't like to interact at all. And I respect that 100%, but for me, it doesn't feel organic. I like the back and forth. And so it doesn't have to be all the time, like always on the phone or whatever, as much as I love that. But, I don't feel like I'm doing my best stuff if I don't have any sort of back and forth with anything.
Yeah.
So that's like a bridge too far. But with some people where they're like, look, give me the script, let me work on it, let me do layouts, and then I'm going to come back to you and then we'll have the back and forth. Great. Some people are like, I want to get on the phone every, 3 pages. Great. So you find what your limits are and what your, as much as you can expand your comfort zone, expand it, but also, yeah, know your boundaries. So, or was there another question?
Yeah,
Tyler?
it's 2 quick ones.
Okay, go ahead.
What were the biggest takeaways you had during your era writing for She Has No Head on CBR, and what did you take from that to your time writing comics?
Well, so I would say one of the best educations you can give yourself to become a better writer, other than this class, obviously, is reading and trying to write reviews for comics, even if you're just writing them in your journal or, on a blog or on social media or whatever. Do blogs still exist? I think Substack is blogs now. I don't know. Anyway, it's because it's just the act of really intentionally reading something because you know that you have to analyze it, and then critically analyzing it, analyzing why something works, or analyzing if something works or not, and then identifying why is like half the job. And if you can figure out why things work and don't work in other people's stories, you can take those lessons for yourself. So writing reviews for CBR and was incredibly informative and helpful to me in that way. I went to SCAD, but I found that to be equally as educational for me, just doing it on my own. And then I think She Has No Head was more of an op-ed situation. I would never call myself a journalist. I'm not that, but it did help me really find my voice and my own truth and the things I was interested in talking about. And it helped me build up sort of a small audience of people who I could see felt the same way. And I really felt like there was something there. It also, unfortunately for me, I was subject to a lot of harassment, which is one of the reasons I'm so reclusive as a creator, actually. But I think all of it helped me to get to where I am now. I don't think you could take any of those things out of the equation and I'd still get here. So it's important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think one of the things I would emphasize to people is just that I think there's like a myth that, when you're analytical about story or narrative and you take it apart, mechanically for yourself and try and figure out what works, it somehow loses some of its like wonder. But I was thinking about it, like my wife, when she was in med school, I remember she did gross anatomy, and I remember just being like, how do you like deal with like a dead body and all like months of just looking at the organs and the mechanics of like of a human, and not look around and just see that all the time, and see just we're just this architecture. And she was like, well, the difference is like when you see, I it is that way, and then yet I've been in an ER, she was saying, where like you're looking at a beating heart, open, and she's like, it doesn't, it's magic, like how it works, but you're watching it, and it's like a totally wondrous divine thing where you're like, how is that thing doing that, even though because it's amazing. And I think that's the way it is with writing, where it's like, you know it doesn't take anything away to understand how something works, because when it's working on you and when you love it, it still has that amazing thing that's untouchable somehow, that still is mysterious. So don't be afraid of being like looking at your favorite stuff and dissecting it and being like, well, where is the act break? How do I get to know this character? What are the lines that make me understand who this person is and what they want? Where is the villain introduced? What is the pacing like? Do all of it, like really take it apart, because it only gives you a greater appreciation for it. It won't make it less to you, I promise. Like there's nothing, I
Yeah.
like look at the stuff that I love over and over again and try, and there's still the wonder when I read The Dark Knight Returns, or I read, whatever, it's just still there. So
We talked about this a little bit in process. We mostly talked about outlines and stuff because I'm obsessed with them. because I don't want to get lost in the woods ever again. But one of my big things that happens very early, I'm very dialogue driven. So the first thing that'll start happening for me once I'm working on something is all in my notes file on my phone and on a document. There will be lots of lines of dialogue of scenes that I think are coming or emotional moments or whatever. And some of those things make it back into the script unchanged. Other things never make it, and other things evolve. But it's part of my way into figuring out the character for sure. So I really relate to that, Scott.
Yeah. Was there anything else, Ty, or is that
I
it?
had one last question. It's a
Okay,
very
hit
serious
us.
one. Kev asks, whose idea was it for baby Diana to yeet the snake?
Oh, it's definitely my idea, but we talked a lot about whether we wanted to use yeet or not. It's a little dated if you want to think of things that way, but more importantly, it was humorous. But I thought we needed it, and we all decided we liked it, and so we went with it. And it seems like most everyone almost universally seems to have enjoyed it.
They loved it.
I think that and the thing where she kisses the creature on the head and it says smack.
Yeah.
I had this really nice conversation with Kieran Gillen about it that really made me happy.
Aaron is the best. Yeah. There's everyone should go pick up the Power Fantasy.
Oh,
The Giants OG put out.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, the Giants OGN. And Jamie also has the was it One for Sorrow? One for Sorrow, that book from Distillery is great. He wrote and drew it. And I just read the first issue the other day. It's great. It's like Victorian horror, so embarrassment of riches these days.
yeah.
Right. Well, again, we don't usually go this long. It's usually like an hour and a half, but again, this was like such a joy, and I'm so grateful to you, Kelly. It's been like, again, like we're friends. I love talking you out of this, but like having you here and listening to you is inspiring for me too, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
And
So great.
same for me. Thank you so much for having me. It was a really great time.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Like everybody out there, this is the way it works, and I hope you'll keep it up. And again, please go follow Kelly on everything. Like we'll put it in the link tomorrow. What we'll do is we post the class in the newsletter, and you can always go. It'll be part of our archive. It'll have all the material in the Dropbox that we used. You can always look at it. It'll have the social media stuff for Kelly and all that too. So
Anything, Kelly, you want to plug right now for people to pick up or check out? Now's your
Um,
yeah.
Thank you. Well, I've been doing this little book called Absolute Wonder Woman. No, so there's that. I'm also doing Birds of Prey, which
Yeah.
I really love. It's got a lot of super fun characters. We are not at a great point for you guys to jump on. Our issue came out last week, or I'm sorry, our issue came out the week of the election. But that was part 2 of our new arc. So we're sort of in the middle of it, but it is a pretty easy arc to jump on because it was part of the all-in, new arc jump on points. There's also a really beautiful, amazing trade out there by Leo Romero and I and Jordy that I really love so much. That was the kickoff for the arc. So if you've ever been interested in Birds of Prey, I don't think it's as complicated as Absolute Wonder Woman and like the layers of it, because it's an ensemble team book and you just have to treat that a little differently. But I think if you like what we're doing on Absolute Wonder Woman, you'll find a lot to like on Birds of Prey. My guy, it's Jeff, who's debuting in Marvel Rivals Game in December. He
Yes.
also has his longest print story ever coming out next week, actually, which is it's a Venom War tie-in, but you don't have to have been reading all of that stuff. It's just a fun Jeff adventure that includes some West Coast Avengers friends and some Venomy stuff. And I'm also writing Black Cloak right now, which is my creator-owned book. We're in the middle of our second volume right now, and while I love the first volume really desperately, I have to say that Meredith McLaren, my artist, she's pulling out all the stops. Like she keeps drawing like pages where I have to go, I think this is the most beautiful page you've ever drawn. Like I can't believe I'm saying that. So she's incredible. I'm really lucky to have her as a collaborator.
That series is fantastic. I
Thank
love
you.
it. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah. All right. So again, like go follow Kelly, go pick up all of her stuff. Thank you guys. If you never come back to the class, we appreciated having you tonight. But again, like I hope you will, and we're just doing it for fun. So yeah, I hope you'll be a part of it. And Kelly, I'm sure we'll talk like tomorrow or whatever. But
Yeah. Thank you
Great.
so much.
All right, take care, you guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
Kelly.